And so the irony here is that, Justin, I see you're wearing a black shirt. Black has actually become the color of these protest movements. And it's important because black is not red. Red is the color of the opposition. And if you're wearing red, you're basically saying, take us back to the status quo before the coup. Take us back to the 31st of January, where the red, the NLD, Aung San Suu Kyi's party is in power, the green, the military are kind of in the barracks, kind of out fighting wars against the ethnic peoples. But black is an explicit move on the part of these protesters, pretty spontaneous, to get beyond that sort of dyad and start to say, okay, what would this next phase look like? What would true democracy look like? Now, of course, again, as I say, when the violence comes tomorrow, all this sort of optimism is going to look a little bit silly, but it does at least reflect what people are feeling on the ground. And I've been, spent the last 24 hours times 7, whatever that is, 168 hours. I mean, I have slept a little bit, but I've been talking to a lot of people on the ground, and they really do feel like this is a really powerful, important movement. So like, I want to take a moment to describe what the scenes on the ground look like. You have,
please.
Like, mostly young women, a lot of Generation Z kids who are holding up placards telling the, in very ribald ways, telling the general to go fuck himself, and in very creative ways holding funerals for him, talking about how they're gonna fuck his mother to death. You might have to bleep this.
No, we don't.
No, that goes in.
Okay.
That's part of it.
I can even give you, I can send you the protest signs. I swear my translations are legit. And why this is important is that for a long time, protest was kind of led by a set of like vanguardist activists who I respect more than anyone in the world, but it was a pretty specific thing that they would lead and everyone else would follow. And what's really interesting about this moment is that it's kind of being led by the young people who are out there not taking orders from anybody, not looking for leaders. And there's one, my favorite sign is actually in English, and it says, there are no supreme leaders. And I think that's a shot at the military, but it's also kind of a shot at Aung San Suu Kyi. For a long time, last 10 years, has kind of said, and one time she literally said, vote for us and we will make all the decisions. And I think that young people in particular are rejecting that. One other thing is that the Rohingya minority, which I spoke about a moment ago, they live a very imperiled life and remain undercover, even in cosmopolitan spaces like Yangon. They try to blend in with the normal population. And the irony there is that people hate Rohingya without ever realizing that they've seen Rohingya on the streets and not known that they were who they were. And that's the kind of frustrating part about hatred, is that it prevents you from seeing the thing that you actually hate. And if you saw it, you might not hate it as much. So what these people are doing, because of this particular moment, they're out in the streets, and I have I have 12 or 13 different signboards and different people holding up signs that say, we Rohingya are against the military. And what is really powerful about that is that it basically says, look, we were a subject of genocide and we're still on your side, even though you weren't on our side. More importantly, we were subject to this military. We, more than you guys on the ground, living your normal life in Yangon, we see what's actually at stake here because we've gone through it. We know what the military can do in the space of exception. And so we're kind of on the same side. Now, who knows when the sort of ebullience and the sort of, that special feeling, the affective feeling you have during a protest, when that starts to go away, when people get back to their real life, will the hatred of Rohingya reemerge? It may, but at least it's beautiful to see, people on the street kind of standing, not eye to eye where they're like looking at each other's difference, but kind of hand in hand looking at a common enemy.
So there's been a lot of that, Rohingya and the Buddhist population kind of together in defiance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but it at least is existing on the streets, and that to me is pretty cool.
That is super cool.
I got a question. Go.
You first, Alan.
The protesters in the streets, right? And how are they mobilizing and how are they organizing this? Because hasn't there been a lot of effort by the military to restrict not just freedom of speech, but specifically organizing?
Yeah. And one of the many unfortunate aspects of the Aung San Suu Kyi era is that she had more political prisoners in prison than the previous military leader, Thein Sein. So from 2010 to 2015, there was a proxy party, the USDP. They won because the NLD sat it out. And they actually did a lot of pretty good things relative to what we expected, and that's when I was doing most of my on the ground field work with these activists who were kind of like pushing against an open door. They're like, really, we can do this? Okay, let's go. And then oddly enough, when Suu Kyi got in power, there was a sort of that door slammed shut. And I wrote something back in 2016 where I came back expecting to see them, because I went back to the States for a while, expected to hear all the new things they were up to, and they were never more frustrated because they had basically been told explicitly by the lady, you guys played your role, now we're in democracy, please fuck off. And that was quite devastating for them. So what we see now, however, is a bunch of people who are used to having to organize under repressive conditions. And so this is old hat for them. They were able to organize massive uprisings in 88 and 2007, way before the internet. So 2007, what do you mean that's before the internet? Well, in Myanmar it was. And so the internet wasn't really free. It was very difficult you couldn't even use Gmail until 2011. And so it wasn't a place where everyone had a hand phone until probably 2012, when there was a huge explosion of hand phone penetration. And as a result, the military tried to play cat and mouse or whack-a-mole, or whatever metaphor you want to use, with shutting down the ways that people were organizing, and they just kept switching platforms. So on Friday, they shut down Facebook, and everyone got VPNs, or switched to Twitter, or switched to Signal. And so there were different ways of organizing there. The other thing is that because people had organized before, relying on this sort of digital communication, there were a lot of, there's only so many places you can go in Yangon. There's a lot of ways to call people out in the streets. And so people were basically taking their cues from the previous styles of protest that were kind of in their DNA at this point.